This is Nerman, and he killed his ex-wife while live streaming the whole thing on Instagram, and apparently over 12,000 people watched the live stream. Nerman Sulejmanovic has had previous encounters with the law, including assaulting a police officer and drugs trafficking. On Friday, Nerman began a live stream on Instagram with over 12,000 people watching. He said that they were about to see something that's never been seen live before, a murder. He then panned the camera around to his ex-wife, whose face was covered in blood with facial injuries. Shockingly, you could also hear their daughter crying in the background. He then shot her in the head and then panned the camera down to the floor where his child was laying in a pool of blood and said, "Someone come and save the child," before he left the house. He then went on a shooting spree, killing 2 other people, a father and son, and injuring 2 others, including a police officer. He then shot and killed himself. What's really shocked me about this story is that there were apparently people on his live stream posting supportive comments towards him, and the police have said that they could face charges.
These are the terrifying text messages a woman sent to her family before being found murdered. 20-year-old Mahogany Jackson was from Birmingham, Alabama. On the 23rd of February this year, she sent her mum some disturbing messages before vanishing. She stated, "Send police, apartment 3 held hostage, don't call, send address to Jaslyn, hurry." She was not seen alive by her family ever again. It's believed that her family had tried to go to the location that she specified but couldn't find her anywhere. On the Sunday, her mum Gail Maddox posted on Facebook that her daughter was missing and documented what she'd put in the texts. Then, tragically, the following day, a member of the public found Mahogany dead. They called police after discovering her on the side of the road suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. She was found naked and was in an absolutely horrific state. The abuse she suffered is believed to have been videotaped, and the graphic video has been shared on the internet. Police have arrested 7 suspects in the case. There were 4 men and 3 women, and apparently these were her so-called friends. She'd been SA'd and beaten. Police have stated the facts of this case are deplorable and sickening. This man killed his girlfriend in the most hideous way after she called out her ex's name during intercourse. It was 2015, and 26-year-old Fidel Lopez was dating 31-year-old Maria Nemeth. The pair from Florida were drunk one evening on tequila and were engaging in intercourse when something hideous happened. After Maria accidentally called out her ex-husband's name, Fidel stated that he got really mad and turned into a monster. He flew into a rage and smashed a sliding glass door. He then started punching holes into the wall and pulled a wardrobe door clean off. Not content with the destruction he'd already caused, he attacked Maria with a beer bottle. He then horrifically ripped out part of her intestines. He callously washed his hands and went outside for a smoke before ringing 911. He told the dispatcher that his girlfriend wasn't breathing and emergency services raced to the scene. When they arrived, they found Fidel lying on the floor with her body, crying for help. Now, I can't actually divulge on here on TikTok all of the information as to what he originally claimed happened, but he did eventually confess to her murder. I've had to remove parts of his statements for obvious reasons due to terms of service, but he said, "She called me the name of the other guy, she was confusing me with him." He was given life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This is the class photo, one of the most disturbing and shocking photos of all time explained. Okay, so at first glance, this photo looks like an ordinary American high school class photo, right? That is true until you realize that the 2 boys in the upper left-hand corner shooting imaginary guns at the camera is none other than Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. A few weeks after this photo was taken at Columbine High School in 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold put an evil plan that they'd been working on for more than a year into action. The 2 seniors placed 2 bombs in the cafeteria as well as in their cars, which were parked in the school's lot. These bombs failed to detonate, but the 2 boys proceeded to shoot and kill 12 students and 1 teacher. They shot and injured a further 21 people, while 3 others were injured trying to escape the massacre. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold then committed suicide in the school library. It was revealed afterwards that the shooters hoped that their planned massacre would claim more lives than the Oklahoma City bombing, which took the lives of 168 people. This is one of the most famous and one of the worst school shootings of all time, and it's crazy that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold foreshadowed what they were doing in this class photo. Now when I look at this photo again, all I see is a bunch of seniors in high school ready to graduate. But Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold are ready to take as many lives as humanly possible, waiting to follow through with a plan that they've been working on for over a year.
This beautiful 16-month-old baby was left home alone for 10 whole days while her mother went on holiday. Sometimes I come across stories like this and I can't actually believe that evil like this exists. Crystal Candelario, 31, left her home in Ohio and went on holiday for 10 days to Puerto Rico without a care in the world, knowing full well that her 16-month-old baby girl was home completely alone. According to neighbours, it wasn't the first time that she'd left Jaylin home alone, and they'd often told her that she can't do that, and it didn't stop her. She'd do it quite often. She came home and found Jaylin obviously not breathing after 10 days without food or water. She was saturated in urine and feces. Crystal called 911, but Jaylin was pronounced dead when they got there. Crystal was arrested and she admitted to leaving Jaylin, quote, at home all alone and unattended, while she went for a 10-day holiday. A post-mortem showed that there were no signs of trauma to Jaylin, but that she died from severe dehydration and starvation. Crystal has just pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of endangering children. She's facing the rest of her life in prison and she'll be sentenced on the 18th of March.
This man made an absolutely sickening confession after murdering his children. Emily and Theodore Price were 2 children living in Nebraska. It was 2021 and the children were fondly known by those close to them as Emmy and Teddy. On the 16th of May, the siblings' lives would come to a horrific end. The children's mum actually lived in Illinois and she became concerned after she was unable to reach the children's father. She rang police and asked them to do a welfare check. Meanwhile, their dad, 38-year-old Adam Price, had actually gone on the run and headed to California. He then showed up at a church and confessed to a priest to killing his children. He actually told 2 different priests how he had intentionally killed the children and that it was not a spur-of-the-moment thing. He chillingly stated that if he had the option, he would do it again. The 2 children were found smothered to death in their beds after Adam had tucked them in. The siblings were described by loved ones as some of the sweetest, most loving children. Police in California tracked the man down just hours after his children were found dead. He was arrested and charged with their killings. Now, investigators actually found evidence of premeditation. Adam had withdrawn $1,500 from 2 separate ATM machines. It's believed that this was done in preparation of going on the run. He also took his bins and recycling out a day early. In court, Adam tried to claim that his marriage was breaking down and he was in crisis. Thankfully, the jury dismissed this and he was found guilty of both murders and he will receive 2 mandatory life sentences.
This woman went on a 10-day vacation and left her baby home to die. This case is absolutely gut-turning, so this is a massive trigger warning. Crystal Candelario is a 32-year-old woman from Ohio, and she worked as a substitute teacher at an elementary school, which makes this case even more disturbing after knowing that she works with children. And like many other people, she decided to go on a vacation during the summer months. And on June 6th, she went on a trip to the Caribbean and left her home in Cleveland, Ohio. But the only issue was she did not seem to care that she was leaving her 16-month-old baby behind alone. Her baby girl was named Jaylin, and Crystal did not come home until 10 days later. And when she got back, she discovered her child was unresponsive. And when paramedics arrived at the scene, they sadly pronounced the child dead. The baby was extremely dehydrated and she was found in a playpen in blankets that were completely dirty. Crystal was then arrested and charged with her daughter's murder. She was fired from her job and pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of endangering children. She is due to be sentenced soon, and if convicted of aggravated murder, she will get life in prison. This case is absolutely gut-turning because what in the world does she think would happen if she left her 16-month-old baby alone for 10 days? The baby obviously couldn't take care of itself and would slowly just die, which is exactly what happened. I don't know what could be going through someone's head to do this to their own daughter, and I wish Crystal nothing but the worst. Rest in peace to Jaylin, you did not deserve this at all.
This woman literally lost her life over a bag of frozen chips. She was murdered by her childhood sweetheart, who she'd been married to for 24 years. Yvonne and Thomas McCann had a rocky relationship and they'd often argue. Their son even told his dad that it was about time he let her go so she could be happy, but Thomas didn't want anyone else to have her. On May 23rd, 2020, they'd been enjoying a family barbecue, but the couple had been arguing after a bag of chips was left out of the freezer. They weren't actually together by this point, and Yvonne had actually started seeing someone else. It was on this day that Yvonne went missing. Thomas said that they'd argued and he'd ended up dropping her off near the home of her new partner. But he needed to back up this story, so he'd used Yvonne's phone to reply to messages from their children. What Thomas had actually done was strangle Yvonne to death in the bathroom. He'd then dismembered her body in the bath and dumped her body parts in rubbish bags near a recycling centre. He'd then passed out on the sofa, and when his children got home, they checked his pockets and found Yvonne's phone and her jewellery. And it was at this point that they realised it had been Thomas messaging them, not Yvonne. Thomas was arrested and he told police that he had killed Yvonne, and he said that he'd disposed of her like trash. He also referred to himself as Hannibal Lecter. Yvonne's body was found 2 days later by dog walkers, and Thomas was charged with her murder and sentenced to life with a minimum of just 13 years.
You ever heard about the show The Twilight Zone? I heard about it, but I've never seen it. In 1982, The Twilight Zone was going to make a movie. That shit went completely wrong. There was going to be this scene where the actor Vic Morrow was going to be carrying 2 children, right? Which was a boy and a girl. And their names were, I don't want to butcher her name, but I'm going to just say it, Mika Din Lee and Renee Shin Yi Chen. The whole scene was they were going to be running away from a helicopter in like some not too deep water. He was supposed to be carrying both of the children. In that time, they wouldn't really follow protocols. The way they filmed wasn't really that safe. Barely any CGI at that time, bro.
Yeah, so they want to do everything like practical?
So they had a helicopter in this scene.
Oh gosh.
The helicopter was 12 to 20 feet up high, so that's mad close, bro. 12 feet, bro, is like a basketball hoop. So they were doing the scene, it was regular. He ended up dropping the girl. Then a firework ended up going off. It shot onto the helicopter. The helicopter got out of control. It ended up falling to where they were. It decapitated
The actor?
the actor and the boy, and it ended up just crushing the little girl.
What the
The director and like everybody who was involved in that
The
movie,
crew?
was like facing like legal consequences and
Yeah.
shit. But specifically the director, which his name was John Landis.
When this girl came home acting strange, her parents recorded her. After the recording was made, she vanished. This is the baffling unsolved disappearance that has plagued investigators for years. 16-year-old Carly Gousset was a fan of scary films. Her loved ones never imagined that their life would turn into one. The teen left her home on the 13th of October 2018. It was the early hours of the morning, and the night before she had been out with friends. It's reported that she lied to her parents about where she was going that night and reportedly asked them to pick her up. When they did so, she was running around acting really disorientated and not herself. Her dad, Zach, actually suspected that she had taken some kind of substance, which she had apparently admitted to. For this reason, her stepmom, Melissa, decided to audio record what Carly was like that night so she could show her the next day. They hoped that by showing Carly this, it would encourage her to not do the substances again. However, tragically, they would never actually see her again. It's believed that while her parents were sleeping, Carly left the house and never came back. Eyewitnesses reportedly saw her walking south, approximately 30 yards east of Highway 6 and 100 yards south of Sierra View Road. She then seemingly vanished without a trace. Police were informed and set about trying to find Carly. Melissa made a Facebook Live video 12 hours after the disappearance in the hope that it would attract attention and encourage her to come home. Her family were desperate for help and wanted anyone who knew anything to come forward. Despite no sign of Carly, her family haven't given up hope. Now, interestingly, actually, Carly's dad was arrested on unrelated DV charges. On what would have been Carly's 20th birthday in 2022, an age progression picture was distributed showing what she may now look like. When she vanished, she was 5'7" and weighing 110 pounds.
These are deaths caught on audio, and this one might be the worst one yet. Before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. This black box recording captures the moment that the deadliest aviation accident in history took place. Japan Airlines Flight 123 departed Tokyo with 524 people on board. The date was August 12, 1985. 12 minutes after takeoff, the pilots broadcasted a distress signal, and the plane then experienced a rapid depressurization which put the crew and passengers at risk for hypoxia. This causes organ and cell death due to inadequate oxygen. They were experiencing a system failure. The disturbing final words caught in the cockpit prove that the pilots understood their fate and there was nothing they could do. They lost complete control of the aircraft. The mind-blowing thing is, when the plane crashed into Mount Takamahara, it registered as a shockwave on a seismometer at a Japanese university. 520 people died, and not all were instant. Several people survived the initial crash but died while waiting for rescue. And the only 4 survivors suffered extremely serious injuries. Here is a recording of the plane going down. This is a trigger warning and viewer discretion is advised.
Can't nobody see you 30,000 feet on your knees and the products make the freaky come up out of.
The man in that TikTok, Samuel Haskell, has been charged with the gruesome deaths of his wife and her parents. This is a really disturbing story, so buckle up. So Samuel is the child of some very, very powerful people in Hollywood. These are his parents. They've led talent agencies like William Morris Endeavor, starred in films, and produced specials for people like Dolly Parton. But although Samuel came from a very privileged background, it seemed like he chose the darker path in his life. So at the time of these murders, Samuel lived with his wife and her parents. There was his wife, 37-year-old Mai Lee Haskell, and her parents, 72-year-old Gaoshan Lee, and 64-year-old Yang Zhang Wang. All 3 of these people were last seen on November 6, 2023. That's the day they went missing. But what happened next is nothing short of terrifying. On November 7th, 2023, the day after the 3 went missing, Samuel hired day laborers. And he instructed these laborers to help him dispose of 4 large black trash bags. When one of the workers opened up one of the trash bags, though, they discovered that it was filled with dismembered human body parts. So they reported that to the police, and obviously the police were tailing Samuel, but the very next day, November 8th, Samuel was seen disposing of another garbage bag. And this time the bag that he was disposing had a human torso inside of it. Samuel was then arrested. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out about how he's always had this interest with guns and weapons and a disturbed mind. But we still don't have any real motive, rhyme, or reason to this crime. I'll definitely keep you guys updated if we find out more.
Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know, and one day you will. A question to you: what will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls, 2 children? Only a coward would do such a thing. We are confident that you have told someone what you have done, or at the very least, they know, because of how different you are since the murders.
This disturbing story that I'm about to explain might make you never use Tinder ever again. In November 2017, the woman you see right here, whose name is Cindy Loof, was swiping aimlessly on Tinder until she matched with a woman named Audrey. The 2 agreed to meet on their first date on the night of November 14th. Everything was perfect, and Sydney even took this picture before she went on the date, saying, "Ready for my date." On their date, they shared life stories and a bunch of laughs. But things took a turn for the worse at the second date when Audrey asked Sydney to go into her apartment. And as a result, Sydney never returned home. Sydney's family knew something was wrong when she didn't text them for 4 days and her pet cat wasn't fed. So as a result of all this happening, they immediately called the police. Unfortunately, a couple days later, Cindy Loof's body was found. Her body was brought to the morgue in 6 different garbage bags because she had been cut into 14 pieces while a part of her upper left arm was never found. After police investigation, the police found it very odd that 51-year-old Aubrey Trail and 25-year-old Bailey Boswell posted videos on Facebook claiming their innocence when the police were never even questioning them. It turns out that this couple is using the pseudonym Audrey on Tinder to lure Sydney into their apartment and recruit her into a cult. And the only reason Aubrey Trail dismembered Sydney's body and removed her organs was because he panicked after she accidentally passed out during a sexual fantasy. Aubrey Trail was convicted of first-degree murder and Bailey Boswell was facing first-degree murder. And this picture right here is the last known image of Cindy Loof before she was brutally murdered by her Tinder date. Or in this case, she thought it was her Tinder date. All in all, this case is extremely disturbing, and rest in peace to Cindy Loof. It also goes to show that you have to be careful when you go on dates with strangers. You never truly know who somebody really is in this disturbing world.
This woman vanished without a trace, and the events leading up to her disappearance are unsettling and bizarre. Chelsea Grimm is a 32-year-old from Stamford, Connecticut. She was living in California and working as a social worker when she vanished in 2023. It was the 24th of September and Chelsea was excited to drive to attend her friend's wedding in Connecticut. She decided to take with her her pet bearded dragon called Roxy. Now, Roxy was actually the reason that she was driving to this wedding because she could not get Roxy on an aeroplane. On the 27th of September, she arrived in Phoenix, Arizona. There, she met up with her sister and a friend. Now, the next day, she actually cancelled plans for lunch with that same friend, and Chelsea was spotted that day at a motel in Seligman. Strangely, she tried to book a room in the motel, but seemed disorientated. She then rang her parents and said she couldn't make it to the wedding in time, and she explained that the trip had unfortunately taken a lot longer than she thought. She told her parents that she planned to camp nearby and then come home. On the 28th of September, her car was spotted by police. When they approached the car, they realised that Chelsea was inside and she told police that she'd got upset. She said she'd been taking photographs of a war memorial and it had upset her. Now, she was actually a part-time photographer, so this didn't seem unusual. She told the officers she didn't really want to drive while she was feeling upset, and they gave her some ideas for places that she could camp nearby. On the 30th of September, a woodcutter spotted Chelsea camping in her car, and the eyewitness said that nothing seemed to be wrong and she wasn't in distress. That was the last ever sight of Chelsea. On the 3rd of October, her car was discovered abandoned. Locals found the vehicle with 2 flat tyres in Kaibab National Forest. Clothing and her camera were discovered in the car. The car was locked and there seemed to be no obvious signs of a struggle. She was reported missing by her parents soon after. Her wallet, phone, sleeping bag and bearded dragon have never been found. Her bank account and social media have had no activity on since she vanished.
These are the worst of the worst videos on the internet explained, and today we're talking about Ghost Rider. The video that I'm about to explain is an infamous cartel execution video, and I don't recommend searching for it because it's definitely one of the worst. It took place in September 2020, and the victim's name is Ghost Rider. And he was apparently tortured for 3 days and was subjected to some of the worst acts of violence you will ever see. The video itself is about 2 minutes long, and it begins with Ghost Rider already in a horrible state. It appears his face has already been flayed, which means skinned, and what the killers do next is absolutely horrible. They get rubbing alcohol and pour it on his face, and keep in mind, his face has already been skinned, so just imagine the stinging pain. They then set Ghost Rider's face on fire and his face is completely covered in flames. And it's disturbingly melting away right before your eyes. It's truly a horrific and disturbing sight. You also hear the cartel members just laughing and mocking him as he burns and his face melts. Ghost Rider is letting out blood-curdling screams as the flames continue to burn his face. The video then skips to later on in the day or a couple days later. And Ghost Rider has been tortured and burned so severely that his head is basically just a red skull. There's no skin, there's no hair, there's no facial features, you can't even see his eyes. And after all of this, he is still alive. At the end of the video, the cartel members tell Ghost Rider to lift his head up, which he does, which confirms he was still alive, and I have no idea how somebody can live through all of this. They then set his head on fire again to make it look like Ghost Rider with his burning skull. Apparently, the guy was nicknamed Ghost Rider because he would do this same thing to people that he caught. which was the main reason he was killed in this exact way. This video is just gut-turning and brutal, and it's definitely up there with some of the worst videos I've ever watched or came across. I don't recommend looking it up at all, and whatever you do, stay curious on this one.
Video, 21-year-old Erica Lawson allegedly sold her own daughter to 6 pedophiles so that they could abuse her. And after this assault was finished, the 17-month-old baby Elena died. Now, this case is absolutely horrific, and it tells the story of someone whose image on social media is completely opposite who they are in real life. So on Erica Lawson's TikTok page, which is still up, she's posted a ton of videos featuring her and her daughter dancing around, seemingly enjoying life. But behind closed doors, Erica was a closeted drug addict. And since details are pretty sparse in this case, and a lot of this is still alleged, this is what we know. At one point in 2023, Erica allegedly sold her daughter to at least 6 men. And when 17-month-old Elena's dead body was discovered, she had been brutalized, beaten, and some people even say she was beaten with a baseball bat. Now, like I said, details in this case are pretty sparse, but from what I could find on news sources, there were 6 DNA samples that were sent off for further analysis. 6 more people, I'm assuming men, that will be charged with this crime. And it's been recently announced that prosecutors are going to be seeking the death penalty against Erica, meaning that if convicted, she could be put to death for this horrific crime. It's absolutely mind-blowing and just disgusting and disturbing that a woman could ever even think about doing this. I mean, allegedly selling your own child to pedophiles to abuse, and then the child dies after this abuse. This is truly one of the most horrific, most disgusting, most disturbing stories I've ever covered. If you guys want to help, head to change.org and help sign this petition, Elena's Law, created by Haley and Haven Lawless. The petition has over 6,000 signatures, and the people who created it are basically asking the legislature in Kentucky to provide harsher sentences for child predators. Something that I 100% agree with, and yeah, I signed the petition. You definitely should too. And I really hope that this despicable woman is punished to the fullest extent of the law. Some massive allegations might be coming soon, and they involve Justin Bieber, P. Diddy, and Usher. So let's start with Usher. Usher was discovered when he was 14 years old by P. Diddy. He was then signed to P. Diddy's record label, Bad Boy Entertainment. Now, P. Diddy was instrumental in Usher's introduction into the spotlight. But according to Usher himself, he was exposed to some disturbing things when he was younger. So in an interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2012, Usher admitted that P. Diddy had brought him to sex parties and exposed him to drugs, all when he was a young teenager. Usher even stated he felt pressured to participate in some of these things that he wasn't mentally ready for. And he went on to state that he regretted a lot of those choices. Usher also went on the record and stated that P. Diddy at the time just wasn't a good mentor or role model to him. So they eventually drifted apart. Now, someone else that P. Diddy found when they were younger was Justin Bieber. Usher found Justin Bieber in 2009 on YouTube and obviously wanted to connect with him right away. Now, from outside looking in, it seems that Justin Bieber and P. Diddy are still friends. In 2021, Justin Bieber even posted a series of throwback photos with P. Diddy. But according to Justin Bieber's own mother, who did this interview in 2023, P. Diddy tried to corrupt her young son from a young age. She claimed that when Justin was still a young boy, P. Diddy pressured him to do cocaine, smoke marijuana, and drink with him at these parties with a ton of adults around. Obviously, this is all alleged, but it's really disturbing stuff. Especially when you know the Jeffrey Epstein level allegations that are coming out about P. Diddy and his horrific ring of abuse. And not only that, but P. Diddy allegedly admitted to murdering people. So I don't know, will these allegations that are coming out in the media be big enough that Usher and Justin Bieber will actually come forward and talk about what happened to them, tell the truth? I don't know exactly what happened, obviously, but I also don't think that they would really come forward and expose stuff like that. They're really high-profile, high-level celebrities. My wife, though, said that there was something with Justin Bieber and his wife, Haley, that they were going to reveal soon. So, I don't know. Something big might be on its way. We need to talk about the infamous Russian pedophile and snuff film ring. So just so I'm factually correct, here's the article I'm talking about here. So in the year 2000, a massive scandal rocked Russia. In that year, Russian authorities uncovered a pedophile ring that ran all the way from Russia to the United States. There were over 5,000 members that were busted in different countries, but the exact details of these crimes are really hard to stomach, so viewer discretion is advised. Obviously, the police and authorities had to watch some of this content that was uncovered, and what they saw was absolutely disturbing. They saw hundreds of different children being abused by groups of men. And on top of that, after the abuse was over, these children were then brutally tortured and killed on camera. Now, something extremely disturbing is that these videos made over $470 million worth of revenue. Just stop and think about that for 1 second. Just stop and think about how much money that is that people were paying to watch these videos. There were people in the US purchasing these tapes. There were people in the Middle East, people in Russia, people in Italy. And in fact, when they were covering this news story, 2 European TV stations accidentally broadcast images and video from the tapes. Graphic, uncensored material. Obviously, the whole team that was involved in that was fired. But the police officers and authorities who actually worked on this case have gone on the record and said every single night since then, they still hear children screaming in their dreams. So these rings operated throughout many different countries, including Italy, Russia, all throughout the Middle East. And what the authorities think they were doing was snatching children out of orphanages and even at times targeting kids when they walked away from their parents at the circus. Now, thankfully, hundreds of people were arrested after this was uncovered and justice was dealt. And thankfully, Russia's prison system is pretty brutal, so I'm sure that the men who were put in there for these crimes got the justice that they deserved. But this is absolutely frightening because this stuff is still happening today in 2024. It's not just happening in Europe, it's happening in America. There's so much more we could get into here. But yeah, we need to continue to talk about this stuff to raise awareness that this is happening.
There's a strange missing persons case happening right now out of Arizona, and we should talk about it. This is Chelsea Grimm. She went missing during a cross-country road trip from San Diego to Connecticut where she was traveling for a wedding. The timeline of events leading up to her disappearance is bizarre, and it's what makes this case so strange. On September 24th, Chelsea left her home in San Diego to head out for the wedding in Connecticut. She was traveling alone, but she did have her pet bearded dragon with her. On September 27th, just 3 days into the trip, she met up with a friend in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was at this point that she called her parents and said that the drive was actually taking longer than she thought. So she was just going to skip the wedding, maybe do a little bit of camping, and then head back home to San Diego. This was the last time that her parents heard from her, but this is where it gets confusing. Chelsea was actually spotted at a hotel in Seligman, Arizona that day after the phone call with her parents. According to a witness, she seemed disoriented and was trying to use euros instead of US currency. A day later, police responded to a report of a woman who was acting suspicious. And upon investigating, the officer found Chelsea in her car at a cemetery in Williams, Arizona. She was crying and she told him that she was working on a photography project about missing soldiers. She also told the officer that she was planning to camp in her car that night. So after he deemed her to be okay, he suggested that she go to a Love's truck stop to sleep in her car overnight. At this point, it's not known if she actually did that or not. On September 30th, a woodcutter reportedly saw Chelsea camping in her car near Ash Fork, Arizona, but she apparently seemed okay, so no call was made. By October 4th, Chelsea's parents officially reported her missing after not hearing from her. And just 1 day later, hunters found her white 2019 Ford Escape abandoned in the middle of a dirt road near Ash Fork. Both of the tires on the right side of the car were flat, and all of her personal belongings, including her pet bearded dragon, were missing from the car. The vehicle was found to be locked, and it appears that there were no obvious signs of a struggle. But it's now been a month since Chelsea was last seen or heard from. Her family has since hired a private investigator to find out what exactly happened to her. With the car being abandoned on a dirt road with 2 flat tires, and the fact that she was a woman traveling alone is really concerning. These are some photos of what she was last wearing, including a photo of her bearded dragon and a mask that she normally wears. Police across multiple states are now looking for Chelsea, and they're asking anyone with information to call the sheriff's office at 928-774-4523.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Amora Carson was only 13 months old when she became the victim of an exorcism. This is a tragic and disturbing story, so buckle up. Amora Carson was a beautiful baby girl born in November of 2007 in Texas. Now, Amora was a very beautiful, very innocent, very normal baby, but at some point her biological mother and her mother's boyfriend became convinced that she was possessed by demons. So on December 2nd, 2008, a disturbing 911 call was placed. The man identified himself as Blaine Milam and said that he had just found his daughter dead. Now, something that should be noted is that Blaine was not actually Amora's father. He was dating Amora's mother, Jessica Carson, and Blaine was actually a convicted and registered sex offender, so he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near children. But when police arrived at the home, they made a shocking and disturbing discovery. Amora's young, lifeless 13-month-old body was found in a hole in the bathroom that the couple was remodeling. And after an examination was done, they found that she had 24 bite marks on her body. Her little ribs were fractured, and there were abrasions all over her face. So very shortly afterwards, Jessica Carson, Amora's mother, and Blaine Milam were arrested. And that's when they started to tell detectives the story about the exorcism gone wrong. So apparently these two, like I said before, thought that Amora was possessed by demons. At one point, they went to some pawn shops in Texas and tried to sell a bunch of stuff so they could afford a priest to come in and do an exorcism on the baby. But when they couldn't scrounge up enough money and couldn't find a priest to come help them, they decided to take matters into their own hands. And after performing their own home exorcism on the child, they told detectives that they beat the child to death to rid it of demons. Now, as if these two couldn't get any more despicable, let me read you the list of injuries that little Amora had on her. I'm just going to read this to you. She suffered 18 rib fractures, extensive bleeding under her scalp, multiple fractures on the back of her head, a lacerated liver, a broken arm and leg, and a bleeding blood vessel in her neck, which suggested possible strangulation. The autopsy also revealed Amora had been sexually assaulted. Her genitalia and rectum were badly bruised, and the penetration most likely was caused by a foreign object. Thankfully, though, these two were put on death row. I mean, what a horrific crime. And they were trying to rid themselves of demons, but they bought themselves a one-way permanent ticket straight to hell.
This murder seriously sounds like it's something straight out of a horror movie. 21-year-old Laura Davis was chased out of her home, through a pasture and to a place called the Wishing Well, where she lost her life in a brutal attack by someone that she'd just broken up with. Laura had met Jordan Taylor while she was living in Derby, where he was in a band, and their relationship moved quite quickly, with Jordan moving in with Laura. But Jordan quickly became very controlling. He would tell Laura who she could and couldn't see, and he would tell her what she could and couldn't wear. The couple lived in staff accommodation at the Essex Horse and Pony Protection Society, where Laura was an apprentice. She'd told other staff members that she couldn't just kick Jordan out and make him homeless, but that she was planning on ending the relationship. On July 3rd, 2015, Laura and Jordan sat down in their kitchen to eat a meal, and Laura told Jordan that it wasn't working out anymore. Jordan absolutely lost it, and he launched a frenzied attack on Laura. Jordan first stabbed Laura in the kitchen, but she managed to run outside. He then followed her and chased her through the pasture and to a place called the Wishing Well, where he carried on the attack. He inflicted over 80 stab wounds on Laura, including 18 in her face, 24 on her arms, 15 times on her torso, 14 times on her legs, 8 times in her back, and 3 times in the back of her head. A passerby actually heard screaming, and they looked over to see Laura on the ground and Jordan crouching over her, stabbing over and over. This passerby did run off, but they called 999, and the police arrived within 15 minutes. They found Jordan absolutely covered in blood. They found the knife, and they then found Laura under some bushes. She was still alive, and she managed to whisper help before she was rushed to hospital, where she lost her life. Jordan Taylor pleaded guilty, but said that he did kill Laura. The jury at his trial was shown CCTV of the attack, as well as being shown the knife which Jordan used, that had been bent to a 45-degree angle due to the ferocity of the attack. Jordan was sentenced in January 2016 and he received life with a minimum of 23 years.
This is by far one of the worst cases in human history, and this is a massive trigger warning. This is the murder of Christine Siluan. She was from the Philippines and was a volunteer in church, and she used the church every day from 4 to 6 p.m. On the day of her murder, she went to church as per her schedule, but she didn't come home after that. Her parents then started to worry and they began searching for her with their neighbors. And what they found was absolutely horrid. They found her body in a farm where half her skull was sliced like a piece of pizza, and her face was literally skinned down to her skull. Also, her brain was completely destroyed by acid. The police then started investigating and they checked the cameras and found out that she was with a guy. The people started protesting about this case and the case was given to special officers. They had a lot of pressure on this. A week before this happened, Christine broke up with her boyfriend, so the police took him into custody. And he was proving he was home all day when she was murdered, but officers were completely tired of this case, and they then sentenced him as the murderer. But after a few months, a thief was caught in a store where he confessed he murdered and raped Christine. He said he started talking to her on Facebook with a fake account and was using fake photos of another guy who was pretty good looking. Christine fell for the guy and she assumed that he was about 20 years old, and they started texting daily. One day, they both decided to meet up at 6 p.m. near the church she went to. But upon arriving, Christine noticed that this was not the guy she was talking to, and this guy was around 40-ish years old. She then refused to talk to him and tried to go back, but he held her hands extremely forcefully, and then took her far away from town and raped her repeatedly. He then put iron rods inside her personal organs and then cut her face in half, and then skinned her whole head down to the skull. And to make it even worse, he put acid inside of her head. The autopsy also revealed that her tongue, trachea, esophagus, parts of her neck, and right ear were missing. The self-proclaimed killer of this case, named Renato Lanas, said that he used barber-type scissors and stabbed her 30 times on different parts of her body and skinned her face. Christine Siluan was only 16 years old, and this case is extremely haunting. There's a picture of her body in the field they found her on, but Google did a really good job of not showing it and hiding it. So even if you do go looking for the picture, I don't think you're going to find it. This is one of those cases that after you get done reading about it, you just feel some sort of uneasiness. I feel so bad for Christine's family, and I can't imagine finding my daughter in this state. May Christine Siluan rest in peace.
31-year-old Melissa Mooney was found brutally murdered in her downtown Los Angeles apartment in what investigators are describing as a violent attack. As of today, October 27th, her killer is still on the loose. Melissa was a real estate agent and model who was also 2 months pregnant when her body was found in her apartment at the Sky at Bunker Hill complex on September 12th of this year. She stopped responding to texts and calls from family members in the days before she was found, which really concerned them. According to Melissa's mom, she ended up getting a hold of Melissa's phone records and called the last number that was dialed out on her phone. Since she couldn't get in touch with her daughter, she figured this was worth a shot and that this person may know something. But when this person answered, they explained that someone was actually just trying to sell them Melissa's phone for $100, and it wasn't Melissa. This prompted her family to go to Melissa's apartment on September 12th, and when they weren't allowed entry, they called the Los Angeles Police Department to come out and do a welfare check. When police arrived around 3:45 p.m. and opened her door, they found that Melissa's apartment was completely flooded with water, and unfortunately, they found her deceased inside. There was no evidence of forced entry, but her phone, laptop, dirty laundry, and her favorite purse were all missing from the scene. So far, the police have not revealed a cause of death for Melissa, not even to her family, but the medical examiner stated they are investigating this as homicidal violence. They also listed, quote, other significant conditions in their report. According to an interview involving Melissa's sister with News Nation, she and the rest of her family only got details surrounding her sister's murder from the mortuary, and the details they got were incredibly graphic. Melissa suffered from head trauma, 2 broken ankles, severe injuries to her hands and legs, and basically her entire body had been badly damaged. The mortuary even said that they had to, quote, put her back together again. Melissa's family had access to her apartment after the police were done collecting evidence, and they described a chilling scene. They said huge chunks of carpet had been ripped up and the fridge was gone, so Whatever happened there was very traumatic. Right now, the family has basically no answers, and the police have not been communicating with them. Whoever killed Melissa is still out there, and her family is questioning what the LAPD even has as evidence. The police haven't mentioned anything about surveillance footage or if they even have a suspect. And with it being like a luxury apartment complex in downtown Los Angeles, I would imagine that they would have security footage. So why hasn't it been released? Like I mentioned earlier, Melissa was 2 months pregnant at the time of her death. She was really excited to be a mom, and according to the family, her boyfriend is extremely devastated and heartbroken. I've attached a GoFundMe for Melissa's family in my bio. Whatever is donated will go directly to helping them continue this fight and getting justice for Melissa. If you have any information at all, please contact the LAPD at 213-996-4150, or you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 1-800-222-TIPS.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
This is how a luxury holiday ended, with a mum being murdered and stuffed into a suitcase. It was 2014 and Sheila Von Wise-Mack was a wealthy 62-year-old socialite. Her daughter Heather Mack had a upbringing that many would have dreamt of. She was incredibly privileged and her dad was famous musician James Mack. They lived in the affluent Oak Park suburb of Chicago. That August, Heather was an 18-year-old and she was pregnant. She was being treated to a luxury holiday in Bali by her mum. They were staying in the 5-star St. Regis Hotel. However, although it wasn't obvious to the outside world, their relationship was incredibly toxic. The pair really didn't get on, and when Heather's dad James died in 2006, this only got worse. Police were reportedly called to the house for DV over 80 times between 2004 and 2013. Sheila had actually called officers to report her daughter biting her, punching her, and once there was even an accusation that Heather had broken her mum's arm. Sheila told officers she was afraid her daughter would kill her. However, she decided to go away on the luxury holiday and try and patch the relationship up. When they arrived on the holiday, Heather took her mum's credit card and bought her boyfriend a $12,000 plane ticket to go and visit her. Her boyfriend was Tommy Schaefer, and the pair had been exchanging worrying text messages. They were referring to each other as the notorious criminals Bonnie and Clyde. They called Sheila a witch and they fantasized about inheriting her fortune. They even encouraged each other to come up with murderous plans. Soon, Tommy arrived at the resort. Just a few hours after he'd turned up, Tommy and Heather were spotted on CCTV. It was the early hours of the 12th of August and the pair could be seen arguing in the hotel reception. Not long after this, Tommy went on to murder Sheila with the metal handle of a fruit stand in the hotel room. The pair then hid the woman's body in a suitcase before dragging it to the hotel reception. They then decided to try and make an escape, so they called a taxi and placed the suitcase in the boot. They then went to the reception desk to try and check out. However, they didn't realise that Sheila had actually become suspicious of her daughter and had told reception staff not to let her daughter use her credit card, so they weren't actually able to check out properly. The pair decided to flee in the taxi, only to raise suspicions of the driver. Luckily, he noticed the suitcase covered in blood and decided to ring police. Officers then tracked down the pair at a cheap local motel. When questioned, they changed their stories multiple times, and initially they tried to blame the murder on intruders. Tommy then later claimed that Sheila had attacked him when she found out that Heather was pregnant. Both Heather and Tommy were charged with premeditated murder and faced the death penalty by firing squad. Tommy would plead guilty and Heather would plead not guilty. In 2015, Heather gave birth to a little baby girl called Stella. She was actually in the middle of her trial at this time. Both Tommy and Heather were found guilty and Heather got 10 years in prison and Tommy got 18. However, that was far from the end of this case. Heather raised her daughter in prison for the first 2 years and she was then placed in the care of one of Heather's friends from prison. In 2017, Tommy's cousin Ryan Bibbs was found to be involved in the killing. It transpired that he'd actually helped to plot the murder and was given 9 years for his part in it. Heather was released from prison in Bali in 2021 and reunited with Stella, who was at that point 6 years old. Just 5 days later, she was deported back to the US. She was then immediately placed in custody and has been sentenced to 26 years in prison.
This is by far one of the worst true crime cases I ever explained, so this is a massive trigger warning. In 2007, the boy on the right named Gabriel Kuhn, who was 12 years old, was killed by Daniel Petrie, who was 16 and on the left. Daniel Petrie and Gabriel Kuhn became good friends and began playing an online role-playing game called Tibia. At one point of the game, Gabriel asked Daniel for 20,000 virtual cash to clear the stage. Gabriel borrowed money from Daniel to use in the game and then refused to pay him back. Gabriel then blocked Daniel on everything, and this made him furious, and he went to Gabriel's house to pay him a visit. A couple of days before the murder, Daniel called the home phone of Gabriel and his mom answered. She explained that she would be out of town and that her son would be home alone if they wanted to play, completely unaware of the boys falling out. And on August 23, 2007, Daniel went to Gabriel's house and knocked on the door. Nobody answered, and Daniel kept knocking, but eventually Gabriel started speaking to Daniel through the door. Daniel told Gabriel to unlock the door and let him in, and if he apologized to him, everything would be fine. Believing this, Gabriel unlocked the door and let Daniel in. And after entering the house, Daniel locked the door behind him. Daniel then brutally assaulted Gabriel. Gabriel tried his best to defend himself, but he failed to do so. Daniel was older, bigger, and stronger. Gabriel was dripping in blood after being brutally beaten by Daniel. Daniel then laughed at the terrified Gabriel and took him to the bedroom, where he then sexually assaulted him. Gabriel cried, but this made Daniel even more cruel. After all of this, Gabriel threatened Daniel, saying he will tell his mother everything that happened, but this only made Daniel more mad. And in a fit of rage, Daniel took a cord from a gaming console and wrapped it around Gabriel's neck and strangled him with it until he went limp. Daniel assumed Gabriel was dead, and believing this, Daniel tried to move and hide the body in the crawlspace leading to the bedrooms. However, the body was too heavy, and after realizing this, Daniel searched the house for sharp tools, and eventually he found a kitchen knife and a hacksaw. Daniel then returned to Gabriel's body, and in order to make it lighter, he took the knife and hacksaw and began cutting at the top of Daniel's leg to remove it, and as Daniel cut into Gabriel's leg, he woke up. Gabriel wasn't dead. He let out a blood-curdling scream, but Daniel restrained him, making sure to twist and turn the blade to make it even more painful. Eventually, Daniel dismembered his right leg and moved to his left. And after severing both of his legs, Gabriel passed away. His autopsy suggested he was still alive throughout the whole ordeal, and he eventually died from shock and blood loss. After Daniel finished the dismemberment, he tried to hide the body again, and he wrapped a cable and wire around Gabriel's body. But the body was still too heavy, and Daniel then fled the house. Gabriel's body was discovered by his brother, and the body was left by the hallway door and the legs and the hacksaw too. Daniel Petrie was admitted to a juvenile center in September 2007 to only 3 years. This is due to Brazil's laws of sentencing minors. And to make you realize how evil Daniel was, when the judge asked him if he had any last words of remorse, Daniel said this: "Gabriel was a coward and a thief. He burns in hell right now where I sent him. And when I die, I will find him in hell and finish my revenge." It's also worth saying that the photos of the crime and Gabriel's body have surfaced on the internet, and nobody knows how they got there. I highly recommend not to look at them due to the graphic nature of them, and they will definitely be the worst crime scene photos you will ever see. It's honestly insane how Daniel is walking free today. May Gabriel rest in peace.
This little girl got revenge on her killer from beyond the grave. On the 25th of January 2005, Katie Coleman finished school and went back to her home in Indiana, United States. Katie was 10 years old and lived with her mum and dad and sister. At 3 p.m. that day, her mum asked her to go to the dollar store to get toilet roll. Now, Katie knew the area well, and it wasn't really far to go. After getting the toilet roll from the shop, Katie stopped at the bank to get a lollipop for her way home. However, when Katie's dad returned home, the little girl still wasn't back. Her parents called police, and a few days later, an Amber Alert was issued. A witness came forward to say that they'd seen a girl who looked like Katie in a truck. The driver was described as a skinny white man about 6 feet tall with short dark hair and fair complexion. Tragically, 5 days after going missing, Katie's body was found. It was in a creek just a few miles from her home. Disturbingly, her hands and feet were tied and she had been SA'd. It was determined that her cause of death had been drowning. 20-year-old Charles Hickman rang the police to confess. He said he and another man had abducted Katie after she'd witnessed a substance deal. He said they tried to scare her into not saying anything and they tied her up, but she ended up falling in and drowning. Disgustingly, this turned out to be a false confession. This obviously wasted police time and caused massive amounts of distress to Katie's family. Police continued to look for evidence and they did find a cigarette butt near to Katie's body. They tested it for DNA and it matched a man called Anthony Stockelman. Police compared the DNA on the cigarette butt to the DNA on Katie's body and it was a match. Anthony, a father of 2 young boys, was in the area that day visiting his mother. He entered a guilty plea and was given life in prison without parole. But this is not the only punishment that Anthony would receive. Now, Anthony claims that he was under the influence of extreme mental or emotional disturbance during the crime. He said this is because his father had died 6 months prior. Regardless, Anthony was imprisoned. Unlucky for Anthony, he was actually housed in a prison with Katie's cousin. Jared Harris was serving a sentence for burglary and was in the same wing as Anthony. Jared forcibly tattooed the words Katie's Revenge across Anthony's forehead. He wanted to brand Anthony for life for killing his young cousin.
This is the woman people are calling the real-life Gone Girl. She faked her own horrific abduction and wasted 5 years of police time. You're not going to want to miss this one. It is absolutely insane. This all begins November 2nd of 2016. Keith Papini returned home from work at around 5 p.m. He was expecting to come home to his 34-year-old wife, Sherry Papini, and his 2 kids, but they weren't home. Keith called the daycare where his kids were staying and asked when Sherry came to pick up the kids. The daycare then told him that she never came, so the kids were okay. He immediately finds this very strange, calls the police, and reports her missing. This was taken very seriously by the police. She seemed to have vanished out of thin air. It wasn't long before the news was reporting on it and her missing posters were all over California. Because there were no leads, fingers pointed at Keith, the husband. Everyone thought it was Keith. He even took a polygraph test and passed it, but people still thought it was him. That's until 22 days later, when Sherry returned. 150 miles away from where she was last seen, a driver finds her walking on the side of the road in chains. This driver called the police and she was brought in. She was covered in bruises. She had lost weight and her back had been branded. Understandably, police were shocked. When asked what happened, she claimed that 2 Hispanic women abducted her. She claimed that they were going to sell her to a man and that's why she was branded. Police were taking this very seriously. Sherry explained in detail the abuse that she went through and the room she was in. She also described the women enough for them to create a sketch of people who did not exist, because it was all a lie. Police found it very strange that these abductors just let her go, but this isn't to say that they didn't believe her. They definitely did, and they took it very seriously. They were determined to find out who did this to this poor mother of 2. The government helped pay for therapy for her PTSD and anxiety after this event. During this time, police were testing her clothes, and they finally found DNA. This DNA belonged to a man, not a woman. And she apparently encountered no men during this kidnapping. They put it through the police database and nothing came up. That's until 2020 when they decided to put it through a genealogy database, hoping that someone related to the person with this DNA went on like Ancestry or anything like that. With this, they were able to find the exact person with that DNA. And this person was Sherry's ex-boyfriend. The story only gets crazier from here, so come back for part 2. It'll be up the moment I'm done filming.
This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 p.m. and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.